Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a financial expert and financial mediator in St. Louis, Missouri. But today I'm talking to Becky Sampson of Only Subpoenas.com, which is somebody you're going to want to know, and you're probably going to have your attorneys going to need to know as well. But today we're going to talk about something that I think is very interesting, at least from our perspective, is that discovery in the divorce process is really power, but these subpoenas come into play with your divorce strategy. So we're going to talk a lot about the fact that when you get involved in a divorce case, a lot of times people are like, I don't have access to the records. Like you could also be in a situation where you have businesses or the business owner has access to the information, but you don't, right? Or other accounts. And you go through this informal process of just saying, hey, can I have these records? Can I have this documentation? But if you're divorcing somebody who's a little bit toxic, they're going to delay you and distract you in the process. And so that's something that lovely Becky has actually experienced in her own world. And I think that it would be helpful to start off the story. Not only welcome, Becky, how are you today?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is always a joy to be on a guest on someone else's podcast.
Right. So, somebody else run it for a moment.
Yes.
But Becky has an interesting story on even how she created this business. And quite frankly, it hits on a lot of issues that we see in discovery that maybe people are not aware of, because again, they think I'm going to go file for divorce. The documents are going to be handed over immediately. And we're going to start analyzing, come up with a settlement offer and be bada boom, bada bang done in a couple months. That's not always the case, Becky. And like, how did you, what is some of your backstory of like how you even came to create this business?
Yeah, so I'll give you the short version of it. I've been divorced twice, not just once, but twice. My first divorce, I didn't even see a judge. I didn't see an attorney. We literally just signed in front of a notary and we were done. Now, I wouldn't say that it was easy, but it was definitely a lot easier than the second one. And I didn't get married to get divorced. It's just I found myself in a situation 8 years in between my two marriages where I married someone that was much older than I was at the time. And we got married, and I remember turning to him and saying, you know what, like, this is my last rodeo, so we're going to make this work. But it was just over a year into our marriage where he had turned to me and asked me to sign a false fraudulent tax return. And, my dad was an accounting professor. My brother's an accountant. I knew enough about this that knew that this was fraudulent. And I turned to him and I said, look, if you want me to sign this fraudulent, in my opinion, tax return, I'm not going to sign that if that's what you're going to put on there. He turned to me and said, look, Becky, like, we need to get divorced, and we need to get divorced fast. So we were living in Hawaii at the time. And it took me several months before we actually filed for divorce. I served him divorce papers at the airport on his way off the island on April Fool's 2020, when the world was shutting down in the middle of COVID. And people are like, well, April Fool's. I said, honestly, they were shutting the airport down, and that was the only day I could get him out. So there was no funny business going on. I didn't know at that time the legal journey that I was going to have to face. I didn't know anything about the legal system. I didn't know anything about the terminologies. I didn't know how to work with an attorney. None of that. So when he left the island, I was stuck in the situation where I was left with nothing financially. So it wasn't that I didn't want an attorney, is I didn't have the funds to be able to get an attorney. So I really doubled down. And at the time I was a full-time student getting my degree in peace building, mediation, and negotiations. I couldn't be learning more about that kind of system, also being thrown into the court system. So the long story of it is we ended up in court for 3.5 years, longer than we were together. And we ended up, I had 5 attorneys that I was working with, or his attorneys, I should say. Eventually, I was able to get an attorney because he had to pay for me to get an attorney. And we had 21 subpoenas that I issued, that I mastered. That's how I kind of got into this industry. And 21 hearings in that 3.5 years. So it was very challenging. I've kind of taken on that nickname of Becky Brockovich, if you've watched the movie Erin Brockovich.
Yeah.
Because she was just an average person that came in, learned, studied, researched, and then helped facilitate one of the biggest court cases out there. Now, mine wasn't the biggest court case, but I was able to settle for a fair and equitable division because of what I learned. And when I finally turned my case over to my attorney, he's been 38-year attorney, and I turned over 21 subpoenas to him, or all the documentation. And he said, Becky, how did you get all these subpoenas back? And I was like, what are you talking about? Because most of them were across state lines. And I turned to him and I said, well, I'm just a researcher. Like, I researched, I learned how to do it. I had an attorney help me and mentor me through that process. And he was absolutely shocked that I got everything back. And so, yeah, it's kind of been a process, and I really didn't think I was going to go into this business, but I knew I was going to support people through divorce. I just didn't know until I found out. Now I'm married, and to the love of my life, third marriage and last, by the way. And we were in a court case, and we got to the place where we were getting ready for trial, and we called our attorney and said, hey, can we subpoena? And he says, no, I don't want to do that. What would we do that for? And I was like, what? And he wanted to charge us an enormous amount of money. And my husband says, like, I don't care how much money it is. We need to get this information. And so they agreed upon it. His paralegal went to work on it. 45 minutes. I go and do my due diligence, come back, talk to her. She's 18-year paralegal. And she says, no problem, Becky. I've already got the subpoena prepared and off to the bank, and it's been rejected. That was within 45 minutes. And I said to her, so did you do this, and this? And she's like, how do you know? I said, because I just spent 45 minutes researching and doing all of that. And so I kindly sent her the instructions. She sent it back through. 2 weeks later, we got all the paperwork. 2 weeks after that, we settled on our case. And my husband turned to me and he says, Becky, you absolutely have to do this for attorneys. So that's how I got into the business.
Yeah. And it's amazing to me because, like, being in this field for so long, I think that I understand all the nuances of what you've talked about. But for everybody else, they may not understand that, in any kind of court case, I mean, we can talk about divorce, but in any kind of situation, if you have to officially get the records, you're probably going to have to go through a subpoena process.
Right.
And it's almost like we just assume that our lawyer is going to do it. We assume, and sometimes we're like, well, I'm going to go through ChatGPT and I'm just going to be like, what subpoena process? For the most part, what I think people don't understand is what you said is they get rejected. And they come back and they say it was too broad. You didn't have the right address. You didn't go to the right person. You didn't know, and in some cases, it's going to be easier to reject it than to fulfill it. Right. And so,
first of all, people don't want to respond to a subpoena. So they're going to find every excuse. And kind of back to what you were mentioning before about discovery. When you're going through divorce, discovery is so important. You need to have the right information and the right documents in order to know. And sometimes, usually in divorce, typically there's one person that has all the information and the other one is kind of scrambling, trying to find that. So that is the step that And I started with that too, right? Like, so as I was learning about this whole thing, I was like, oh, discovery. So in my case, I did ask for the things that I needed and wanted, and he would give me this much, right? When I've asked for this much. And so we found ourselves going back and forth and motion to compel. Yes, you need to give that to her. He still didn't give it to her, motion to compel. And eventually this beautiful attorney that was mentoring me through legal aid, he didn't have time to represent me or help me even more, but he knew that I was a researcher. So he would be like, look, Becky, this is how you can do it. I mean, it's not an easy process. And that's how I got into going straight. And I always say, stop asking for permission and just go get the information that you need. Within 2 to 3 weeks, you'll get it back and you'll be able to settle and be able to get the things through. Yeah. So discovery is a really important part, especially if you're in the financially disadvantaged like I was.
Yeah. And some of the issues that I think we see is that, are you divorcing somebody who's a little bit toxic? Has there been financial coercive control so that they're controlling all the bank accounts, all of the activities and the business and all of this, and you don't have any access to it? They're giving you information. Maybe it's written down. Maybe it's in their own spreadsheets. Maybe it's summaries. It's not the actual underlying documents. Or you get documents and they look like they've been manipulated. They look like something has happened. And you go to your attorney and you say, well, I really need this information. Is there another way? Now, a lot of what we're hearing even from attorneys, and I don't know if it's because they don't have a good track record in getting the subpoenas back, or they don't want to charge their client. Like it could cost $750 to multiple $1,000s to get a subpoena across state lines, international, depending upon if you're going to a privately held company or, like not the big Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, things like that. Like those are probably the easier subpoenas. But when you're going to these smaller companies, and so I think if you're talking, like if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I talked to my attorney and they don't want to do subpoenas. They want to just do informal discovery, or they think that it's going to be too costly. It could just mean that you're hitting a roadblock and you have to advocate for yourself.
Yep.
That's where Becky comes in. That's where this process comes in. And Becky is still working with your attorney. Like it's almost like you're coming in and saving the day for the attorney, making it more economical, right? Because you're less than $750 for
absolutely
a subpoena. But talk to us, because some of your secret power, if I will call it that, is that you're doing the research.
Yes.
You're making sure that you're doing the front load of this process and making sure that like we're going to get the subpoena because I've researched how this company is going to actually fulfill the subpoena, right? But talk more about like that's that's different for every case as well.
Well, first of all, divorce attorneys are up here with stress, right? Like there is so many, like working with a forensics like yourself, right? There's working with forensics, there's working with the emotional taxing. It's very emotionally taxing to deal with people that are going through divorce, getting the right information without the whole story, all of those. So there's a lot of people that touch divorce cases, I should say, to get them through, or they should at least. Now, this is an interesting story because I also have my own podcast, and I've been a graphic designer for many years in branding, and I am doing all my own podcast production at this point, and it's a lot of work. However, this is what I say to attorneys is just because you can do subpoenas, just because I can do all of my podcast production does not mean that that's what I should be doing. So this is what I say to them is that when you've got a specialist in any of those areas, like a forensics, right? Because sometimes attorneys may also want to do forensics, and that's maybe not their specialty. But this is my specialty because of the research that I do, because every single subpoena requires it can require more, some are requiring more research on that and less research on it. So having, with everything that they have going on, and just like this paralegal that we had, 18 years. She's very, very experienced. I'm sure she's done 1 million subpoenas in her lifetime, but doesn't mean that the one that she did that day, she didn't do it right, so it got rejected. There's 1 million different reasons for it to get rejected. I don't even know why it was rejected. I just know that she's probably got this much workload, and I could take that off and send her the instructions, and she was like, bam, it went right through.
Yeah.
So it's that part that I do and that I love. I mean, it feels like, my mom calls me Bulldog Becky Brockovich, right? she just does, because you give me what the subpoena is, and the first thing I do is go research. And every jurisdiction's different. So that's another thing I love about it. It's not always a cookie cutter thing, but that's also what trips up a lot of attorneys, because they would rather, they've got too much on their plate. They need cookie cutter. And this is just not a cookie cutter thing.
Well, and I think that everybody wants to, like, you don't want to charge the client a ton of money to do a subpoena. So you want to just be like, okay, let's make it easy. Let's just send something out. But at the end of the day, and that's when, like we've spent a lot of time talking about like what your specific way of doing things is. And from my standpoint, it comes back to like, you're almost like a subpoena consultant. Like you're coming in and saying, these are the best practices to get this subpoena fulfilled. You even, like at this point of this recording, are guaranteeing that if you're doing some of the research, that subpoena is going to come back and receive the information. But at the end of the day, I think you're sitting between like the client and the attorney and saying, hey, we need to get this information. It may be a little bit more unique in the subpoena world. Like it's not just to a chase or like even with crypto now.
Yeah.
I've seen tons of subpoenas that have gone to crypto or to some of these like, app payment processors that are just getting rejected left and right. And if they get rejected, the attorney might just be like, well, it got rejected. I don't want to charge you again to revise. And we're wasting time. Like,
well, that is my guarantee. So when I first started, I really did a lot of research. 1 out of every 3 subpoenas gets rejected, and it could be rejected for 1 million different reasons. So that was one of the reasons why I said, look, I'm a bulldog. And if my guarantee is it's 100% compliant or it gets accepted, 100% acceptance, or you do not pay. And I do flat fee. So it's like it's a no-brainer for the attorneys, and it's a no-brainer for the clients, because right now they're paying their paralegals, like our attorney did, paying the paralegal to do all the work, and then they didn't get anything back. And then what they're doing is they're going back to the client and saying, oh, well, sorry, we didn't get it, or it's been 4 months. And I'm like, that's just because there needs to be follow-up. So I do all of that follow-up. I do, I chase down those people. I have personal relationships with those companies that you are subpoenaing. I make the relationships is so important in this industry. And when I call them and say, hey, you forgot this, to include this, hey, when can you have it? That's not something that the attorney has to worry about. Like I do that because I'm building the relationship with that particular person. I'm advocating for that attorney, and I'm calling in behalf of that attorney. Yeah. And again, I'm going to say right now, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a paralegal. I'm here to support the attorney in what they're doing. And it's their job to strategize. It's their job to give the legal advice of what they do. I just make sure you get the paperwork so you can get through these cases, and you can move them through quicker and have happier clients.
And I think that's the piece that people don't understand. Like you're really filing a court case so that you can have the legal capability to go and request those documents. And, again, I'm sure you have people that are pro se or representing themselves, and they can probably take these subpoenas and go down to the courthouse and get a signature. But a lot of times people are working them through a lawyer. And so in a lot of situations, like I think, and again, I drank the Kool-Aid once I've met you and saw, I was like, you know what? This is an economical way to get these subpoenas done, because I can't wait for months and months and months to get documents to do the business valuation or to trace the assets or whatever we needed to do. And in my mind, I want to educate, like, lawyers and attorneys need to connect with you because you can come in and help their process, right? On a continual basis, but also clients, like people who are going and then frustrated because
Yep.
their spouse or their business partner is just delaying the process because they want you to quit. They could reach out to you and say, hey, you need to connect with my lawyer. Like, so I feel like anybody needs to come and kind of work with you so
Yep.
that we can get the documents, because the subpoenas are getting rejected at an alarming rate, which
Mm-hmm.
every time a subpoena gets rejected, it's another 3 week to 4 week delay.
Yep.
3 week to 4 week delay. Now we got to go do another one. And then, like, you should estimate, like, I love that you have subpoenas that come back in 2 weeks, but I'm just saying, like, I usually see them in like 4 to 6 weeks. So again,
Yeah, it depends on so it really, so let me just correct one thing that you did say. I
yeah,
actually
please.
don't do subpoenas for pro ses. Even though I was pro se when I did all my subpoenas, you can do them as a pro se person, but because I'm not a legal professional, I'm not an attorney, I can't teach you how to do that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, I can direct you to people in your jurisdiction in the court that could be able to help you do that and draft those. So I don't draft them for pro ses. I only do it for actual attorneys because it's
No,
under.
I think initially when I met you, I thought this was a great way for pro se people to facilitate it. But what I'm saying is that anybody who represents themselves can put together a subpoena.
Yes,
If
they
you have
can.
a case, and they can go down to the courthouse, but they need to make sure that it's sound. They don't know how to do that. Most of the time, where we're seeing people is that you could come in and kind of help the attorneys. And so, and
Yes.
I think that attorneys may not understand that this is a good resource out there to even outsource like, why are they worried about whether it's going to come back or not? They could guarantee that this would
Guarantee.
come back. Why would you not do that, in my opinion? Right?
Absolutely. Well, it is basically shoring up a part of and I'm finding that attorneys just don't do subpoenas. One of my clients, when I was interviewing her before, she came on, she basically said to me, I said, how many subpoenas are you doing in your practice right now? She's like, not enough. I said, that's perfect. That's a great answer, because I know that if you do more of them, and and again, it's the attorney that decides where that strategy is, but if I could be that backbone for you to making sure that they're getting done correctly, then you're going to be able to move. The momentum of your cases are going to catapult. And I'm just like, so you don't even have to worry about that. It's just the one part of your practice you don't have to worry about anymore. Just hand it to me. Like, I did a Lululemon. It was interesting. I did Lululemon, and that's that's in Canada. But it took me quite a while to really find where we did it, and then where we needed to domesticate it in that particular jurisdiction. But it was fascinating, because research is something that I didn't even know that was something that I love to do, but that's what I had to learn through my divorce. And sometimes I was teaching courthouses, because I had a very unusual case that I needed to do when it came to collecting on my on my settlement, and I couldn't find attorneys to know what they were doing. So I was researching, and oftentimes I had to be really careful. But I was teaching the court system how to, say, hey, this is, by the way, here's the statute, here's everything, and they were able to, and I was able to get through. But it's all relationships. You have to have relationships of trust to be able, especially as an attorney, to be able to outsource something like this. It's that important.
Yeah. And I think that what I was trying to correct is that, like, if you find, Becky, and you are a person going through this, that it's really that you're trying to facilitate that communication with your lawyer.
Yes.
Like, if your lawyer is hesitant on issuing subpoenas because they're going to cost, like, they're going to have to charge you a ton of money, and it's prohibitive in your own situation, I think that you still have recourse, you still have a capability of reaching out and facilitating that communication. And then eventually, again, even if you're an accountant, a financial advisor, and you're seeing clients frustrated in this process, like, I think even connecting you with these attorneys is going to be hugely beneficial, because I know this industry and this space so well that you are a missing piece in the efficiency of the process. Because at the end of the day, we're always going to have toxic people on the other side. We're always going to, and whether or not they're really like trying to not give you the documents, or it's just hard to pull all of that stuff together, this is a better way, in my opinion. And if people are out there kind of being like, because again, I don't think the beauty is in the secret sauce of what you're doing, because quite frankly, you've told them, like, you are doing the research to make sure that it's going to the right place.
They just don't have the time. Honestly, Melissa, they don't have the time, and they don't have the bandwidth to do the detail work that I do. And it's not right or wrong. It's not to say that attorneys or their paralegals, I'll tell you, the paralegals are most excited to work with me, because they're like, oh my gosh, I don't have to do this anymore. You know what I mean? Like, so I get it. I totally get it. Yeah. And divorce attorneys and attorneys in general, it's a real stressful thing. And so I just take that stress off of there, and it's fun for me. I really, really enjoy it. I'm one of those weird people, and that they want on their team. So,
and I love it, because what I'm hoping you'll do is kind of like, okay, people have heard this. They're like, I don't know how you do it or what you do, but I know I need this. And I know I'm experiencing some of it. Maybe you can tell us, more about how they can reach out to you, more about how they can get connected the best way. And I think that's going to help everybody, because I have already said that I want to pull you back on with an attorney, and we can talk more about like the subpoena process, the, answers to interrogatories, all of the legal things that go around the discovery process. But I also wanted people to start to get to know you and reach out to you, because I just think you are a hidden gem, and, not so hidden, because I think you're doing stuff around the country. But I want the people that are connected to me to know more about how to reach out to you. So this is your website, and people do spell subpoenas wrong. So it's B.
I know.
Right. But how do they, what's the process to get connected to you that's going to be most efficient?
Yeah, just basically onlysubpoenas.com. I put lots of links on there, or buttons that you can book a Zoom call with me. I know that time is of the essence, so I don't really go too long on these calls. But yeah, you can get in on a Zoom call with me, or you can just call me directly through my number, the 650-910-6659. So
I love that. And, any last parting advice that you have for either lawyers that want to reach out to you in some capacity, or people like, what's the best lesson you've learned in the discovery process from your own experience? Like, whatever you think would be helpful.
I always like to say this, because I even just posted on Facebook this morning about how important we matter as people. So whether you're an attorney or whether you're going through a divorce, I mean, mine lasted 3.5 years, and it took a lot of tenacity. It took a lot of just one day at a time. And so whatever it is that you're struggling with, whether you've got the stress of an attorney or you've got the stress of a divorce, that, taking it one day at a time matters. And the steps that you do and the team that you get around you, you'll get on the other side. This is a temporary time. It's not permanent. Because I can attest to you that I'm living a beautiful life now. It's not perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But I really am on the other side of it. And I'm very, very grateful for what I've been through, so that I can go and bless other people's lives.
Yeah.
So.
And you've created an entire business based on how you helped your own case. And so I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time and effort into this. We're going to have you back, because there's so many things that we could have talked about. But I just wanted people to know that this is a resource. Mm-hmm. And in any of these spaces, when people tell you that there aren't resources available, there are. You just have to look a little bit further. You have to do your research, and we will definitely have you back. But thank you, Becky. Awesome. I'm blessed to know you, and reach out to Only Subpoenas. Do not reach out to me. I do not know how to do any of this. This is very out of my scope, but I know it's needed, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Oh, appreciate it so much. Thank you. And thank you for what you do as well. Appreciate it.